There we are, Liz, it's recording.
Thank you. Okay, so thanks everyone for joining. My name is Elizabeth Shaw, or Liz. I'm an OT in the community stroke team. We cover all of Pennine Lancs. And Sam, you're there as well, aren't you?
Yeah, welcome everyone. I'm Sam Green, occupational therapist, and I'm on the community neuro team, and I cover the whole of East Lancs as well.
Yeah, so today's presentation is generally just an overview of the vocational rehabilitation service and pathway that we provide as part of our stroke and neuro interventions. So we're going to go through the whole thing. I know people that are joining this session, some of it are from our teams, they'll be very familiar and already providing kind of VR input. There'll be some people not familiar with very much of it at all. So we'll just go from the beginning and tell you a bit about our pathway and how it developed in the first place, and any questions we can answer at the end. Okay. So first of all, vocational rehab. So hopefully you can see the triangle there. So it's in a bit of a stepped approach. This always confuses us, and you have to really think which way is which way. So kind of as it says, level 3 is actually almost like the entry level of the service that you provide in. So level 3 there is basic support, so general advice, encouragement and information about work. It's normally provided by any healthcare professional as part of your routine care. I'll mention about competencies and what we expect of our staff later, but in general, that's anyone and everyone could be asking questions, just information gathering, discussing return to work plans and mentioning other services that can help. Going up a level. Level 2 is the service that we're funded for. So ELHD are funded for level 2. So this is up to and including the service that we provide. This is more targeted support, specialist local services. So it's more tailored help for people with manageable barriers to their employment. So we help people get back to their previous jobs. It can include work-focused therapy, workplace advice, return to work planning, including use of something called the AHP report, which we'll again mention a bit later, and direct liaison with employers as required. It isn't always required, often it is. We've found, we'll mention a few case studies later on, but we've found that all employers tend to be a bit different, but in general, a bit of structured support generally. It's not one size fits all, but generally the same support we provide for all patients, but the employee's response and how we do that can just be a bit different. Level 1 is the highly specialist regional service. So as I say, we're not funded for that, so we would refer on to other third-party agencies, of which we do have a few in our local area. So that's, as I say, more specialist input for complex cases, and also looking for alternative employment. So we don't get involved in alternative employment if, for whatever reason, they're not able to go back to their previous job. And we would signpost on to local services that we'll mention later, but there's people in the job centre and local charities, and yeah, we refer on to them. So in general, our pathway, I'm going to try and click on it and see if this works. Show you. Let me know if it changes.
I will do, Liz.
Has anything changed?
No, we've still just got the slideshow.
Okay.
While you're talking, Liz, I could try and get it up unless you're... Oh, no, go on. It's come back to you now, so if you share your screen of it. This is proof, isn't it, to not have back-to-back visits before you do some training.
Okay, can you see the pathway?
Yeah, we can now.
You can. Okay. So this is our pathway. It's a lot of information. You're not required to see all of this or understand any of it. It's just to demonstrate this is the piece of work that was an outcome of Sam and I and other people's involvement in establishing this pathway. So I think it was probably, what do you think, Sam, 2 years ago that began creating this pathway?
Yeah. Yeah, we were
Yeah.
trying to make it more consistent, weren't we?
Yeah, more consistent approach. Also we think it's about 34% of strokes on our current caseload now are working age. There's much more demand for it. We need goal-centered input. Do you want to talk a little bit about the pathway content, Sam?
Yeah, so we wanted to make sure that everybody had somewhere to look at, so that there was templates of the reports that we were doing, again, to have more of a consistent service, so that people weren't just doing a report about return to work. It was on the AHP paperwork. And then there's the resources on there, there's evidence, and also other information about return to work, so that when we're getting new staff in, we can signpost them to there to have a look, and then they can come and talk to us as well, or other people in their team.
Yeah, yeah, so as part of it, all the...
Sam, can you, I don't know, lean closer to your laptop, because you're very quiet.
All right, that's not like me, is it? All right, sorry about that. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so a bit more detail about what our pathway includes. So the pathway was ratified. I know it is what our service provides. So we've got some links to some guidelines on there from Cochrane reviews, RCP guidelines, NICE, RCOT. There's links to demand and capacity audit that took place a few years ago, whereby we were commissioned to deliver the level 2 input. Competencies are being created, not specifically for this as part of our service in general, but we do have some vocational rehab competencies. They're in a bit of a graded approach. So the competency might be the same as, for example, to be able to gather information at initial assessment, but what banding the staff member is depends, to what level of information staff members are supposed to be able to collect. So we've got some competencies graded on banding. In terms of workforce requirements, as we said, level 3, so that's the base of the triangle. Everyone is supposed to be able to have conversations about work and just kind of gather whether even that's just, are you working, were you working leading up until your brain injury, what hours did you do, even just general information, so that when these patients are fed back to the rest of the team, we've got an idea before we go in. Did they work from home? Are they a driver? Thinking about already what the barriers will be, and driving often can be a bit of a one. But so that's level 3, that's the general input for everyone. In terms of when we go up to level 2 input and getting a bit more involved, predominantly we are OT led in terms of providing the input, but where required, of course, there is often the need for kind of input from our speech and language colleagues and physio if there are any, physical barriers, language barriers. There often is an overlap, and I know in other areas there is a bit more of a push for especially speech and language therapists to be more included in vocational rehabilitation. But yeah, as part of ongoing work, we use these competencies during our appraisals for guidance for staff to how to develop their VR abilities as well. Also on the pathway, we've got some trainings on the e-learning for health. There's general fit note training. ELHT, and we don't currently complete them, but we've done the training. We probably need a recap. There's the vocational rehab.
Yeah, we can use the AHP reports as well as a fit note, can't we? So
yeah, they can legally act, can't they?
Yeah, we'd be using that if we decided somebody was going back to work sooner than the the fit note or the sign off date.
Yes, the GPs in general won't create a fit to work document anymore, but our AHP report acts as that. So basically override an ongoing fit note to say, basically says this person is fit to work, taking into account the following.
Yeah.
Also on the e-learning for health, there's a vocational rehab toolkit. Sam's created some in-service training that we have a link to. There's also other links on there for trainings that are just available. Initially, when this started, me and Sam were talking last week, actually, it's come a long way already. We're due a review of this formally. But when we first began this pathway and implementing it in our service, anything more specific, we were starting to run almost like a VR clinic, using it as a bit of an patients would come into us in an outpatient setting. The clinician that had referred the patient in would come with them for their learning.
Yeah.
That stopped quite soon because we found we needed to have the referrals. It wasn't always the most efficient use of time. But actually, what we found is since this pathway was ratified well over a year ago, actually all of our staff, all of RTs, majority wise, are actually providing a level 2 input now themselves. There isn't, we might have clinical discussions where it's second opinion or what do you think about this? Is there anything else I can do? But in general, already through this pathway, the majority of our RTs they're all providing level 2 input now, aren't they, Sam? So there's not been as much need for the specific clinic.
And we're talking about it much more, and it's getting cascaded down, and even talking about it in those initial assessments, because I think that's where it come from as well, isn't it, that they were coming off maybe the acute stroke wards and families or partners were panicking, saying, well, work are getting now in touch and what do we do? So when we're talking about it sooner, that's helped reassure family members, and they've not been as panicked, have they, if somebody can't return to work at that stage?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
The next thing was hopefully that's changed to our leaflet.
Yeah, it has. Yeah.
Yes, we created a bit of a leaflet. This is, as most things, could be used a bit more frequently and a bit more regularly. But we created a bit of a leaflet just as something that we can send out to patients or hand out during our initial assessment. We created this, which has got a little bit of guidance on there just to explain. There's a bit about on there about fit notes, about occupational therapist role, briefly about the third parties that we might involve if it's not necessarily coming from us. We don't necessarily need to VR every single patient that's returning to work. A lot of it's manageable. They might just need some brief guidance. So we've got this document as well that we found useful just to have, and almost sometimes actually staff might question, it's come to the end of therapy input as such, but VR hasn't come up or something's changed, and a lot of the time I will recommend, can you send them out this leaflet, and then they've got this, so a concrete thing to have. Do you want to say anything else about the leaflet, Sam?
No, because I think I think that it's helped staff be aware of what's available to signpost to as well.
Yeah.
And being that opportunity for staff to talk about it. So I do feel that, like you say, over the last 12 months we've come a long way, haven't we?
Yeah.
Of knowing what's available.
Mm-hmm. There is the next section almost will be about third-party organisations, but on the pathway we also link to them. They're constantly changed, as well as things doing your local areas will be the same. To do with funding and who's commissioned in them. We've got links to the AHP report, which again we'll show you some examples of, and the outcome measure that we use is the WHODAS, that's the World Health Organization Disability Assessment Scale. We found when we were looking for a useful one, again, we need to look at this again, there might be others now, but we found there wasn't many many scales that would specifically include leisure activities in general, but also specifically vocational rehab. So this was one that did, so it was the one that we chose. Again, with all outcome measures, we could use it a bit more often, but we have used it, and with the people that we have used it with, it did show an improvement, didn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm
So
going to talk about the third parties.
yeah, I will do. So some of you will have heard about access to work, and I think it's being mindful, not thinking that it's a quick service is access to work. So you can refer to that service. However, when me and Liz have been going on our national vocational rehab groups, a lot of people are getting varying feedback about access to work, waiting times, and what they're now offering. So I definitely just look into it before you recommended it. And often they want somebody to have a return to work date. So if you've got somebody who's struggling, so for example, I had a young gentleman who was a traumatic brain injury from an assault, and he was really low level but was trying to go back to work as a project manager for a big company. Access to work weren't very helpful in that. His mum got in touch with them, and they were very vague and weren't very specific about what they could offer, and then the time scales were long. So I think it was 3 months and they'd still not heard anything. So I feel like access to work has changed over the period. And also they'll only help smaller companies. So if somebody's I think it's if they've got more than sort of like 20 people who they employ, then they would expect the company to do that. So again, but it is there, and it's a government funded service. Then we can also use charities like the Stroke Association and Headway for support. And I definitely feel like they have guest speakers on that might talk about specific things. Like sometimes Headway will have solicitors that have been involved in certain processes. So they're always good for families who are struggling with the adjustment of maybe somebody that can't go back to work. They're a good source. Since we started all of this, we've started using our disability employment advisors, and they're based at the local job centre, and they would be based locally. So for me and Liz, who cover the whole of East Lancs, that would be 6 different job centres. We've got their emails so that we can refer to them. And again, it's another service that can vary quite dramatically depending on each area. Which has been a bit of a challenge because you expect this. So I had one service that pretty much just signposted and did what I would have probably done during a therapy session. And then I've had other people who have really supported them and helped them, say, do application forms for jobs. So it really does vary, but it is a service to look into and ask them what they provide. And then, can everyone hear me okay? I'm not getting feedback, am I? Yeah, is that okay? Okay. And then recently I've just come across, and this is just for Lancashire, it's a Connect to Work scheme. And this, I found out about this scheme. That's why me and Liz always say, be mindful, everything's always changing, and just sort of have your ear to the ground. So this service I came across because the DEA had referred my gentleman with the traumatic brain injury. I'd referred to the disability employment advisors saying, please can you support this gentleman? He's wanting to go back to this role. Is there anything they could offer, like confidence building courses? There's some better, it's kind of confidence building course or anything like that. And then they referred to the Connect to Work scheme. Now I've got my little blurb here so I can tell you what it is, but then I've lost it. So right, so the Connect to Work scheme, it says it can help you if you're finding it tough to get a job. So they would be the more level 1 bespoke service, or stay in work. Whether you have a disability, a long-term health condition, or you're finding it hard to keep a job, we're here to support you. Let's talk. However, when my young gentleman went with the traumatic brain injury, it was a bit too early in his process. He was just wanting volunteer work at that stage. And they didn't offer that. He had to be applying for jobs and looking towards actual paid employment. So it's just bearing in mind the criteria of some schemes. Then we have our social prescribing schemes, which are again local to each area, and often we have somebody who's a spokesperson for that scheme within each of the teams, so that again they can keep us up to date with different things that are available. Community connectors, they're a similar type of role, and again it's seeing what's available in your area. Two good services that are good to tap into are ACAS. Now they will give advice for the employer and the employee. Now sometimes when you Google it, you think it's just for the business, but ACAS, we've had a talk on them again from our national group, and they're a really good service, lots of experience, and it's free informal advice. So I would definitely. So again, my young gentleman who had the traumatic brain injury from the assault, basically his employers treated him really badly and said he wasn't fit to do his job, even though the occupational health report had said he had. So at that point, it was, above my role. So I encouraged them to contact ACAS and get some support from there to look into that. Another service that we use is the Citizens Advice, and we signpost to them if somebody's struggling or we feel like they're, being unfairly treated. A good service that we use is, or we signpost people to, is the Lancashire Volunteer Partnership. And I've just had a quick look on there today, and there's a role volunteering if it's somebody who's a car driver to help somebody who's reduced mobility and can't get out and about as much. So that's a good service. Oh, and then the last one is I usually, if my patients are thinking about going back to work, they're just starting to maybe catch the bus or going to town, I often signpost them and say, go and see what's going on in your local library. And I really do think there's lots of good groups. They can have knit and natter groups, computer groups, but libraries have changed over time, and they're a really good source to get people going to groups. All right, Liz, is this back to you now?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot that I had control. I'll see what was next. I think the background noise as well is coming from me. There's someone cutting trees down outside, so just let me know if it becomes too unbearable.
Okay, yeah,
just
we'll do.
to add into the third party agencies, one of them, again, it's our local one, but some of the social prescribing, I've had a gentleman who we did actually help him retrain, and he went to local college and did a bit of a course, as an upholsterer. He was an electrician. So although we weren't directly involved, as it's the top level, I found out about it because I was still seeing him for his upper limb. But it wasn't possible for him to go back to his previous employment, so they put him through an upholstery course. And the local libraries do often run courses like typing courses as well and things, don't they, Sam? Which would be really helpful.
Yeah.
They're getting closer. How it's going. So we've had an increase in vocational rehab objectives during our PDR appraisal processes. So like Sam said before, just more awareness of that the vocational rehab pathway exists, more people getting involved in completing their competencies, increased awareness, more people bringing things to us, not just OTs, the wider MDT as well, saying I've got this patient, I'm thinking some support with return to work. That might not always happen at immediate initial assessment either. People aren't always ready to go back to work immediately, are they? So can be referrals later down the line, which is valuable. We've had lots of success stories. We've got many, many people back into work in some format now. And also it is working with the digital transformation in that we don't necessarily do all of this work face to face. So a lot of it can be done over email to the patient and the employer. a lot of the time that helps them develop their skills as well for getting back to work, getting used to being back on the laptop, replying to emails, showing initiative. Like we said, we sometimes bring people into outpatient appointments, which isn't exactly digital, but it reduces our travel at least. Again, show it.
Hey there, Liz. It's gone very quiet.
Mine's right outside the windows. They sound really bad.
It's not too bad.
Okay.
It's bearable. Do you want? I could do my once you've done the next one. I could go on and do my case study, couldn't I? Do you want me to do that one, and then we'll come back to your poster?
Yeah, go on.
Okay. So I think I've got. Has this gone? Does this say Costa Coffee Lady on the case study? You go on mute, Liz. Yeah. All right. Okay, so we just wanted to give you a case study of. So Liz is on the stroke team, and often she'll then refer. She only has a 6-month time limited input. So it was just looking at a case study that I've just had, which is a neuro lady. So she was referred to us in February 2024, and she'd had 2 months in patient rehab at that point. She was mum to a 3-year-old and a 12-year-old, and she was only 40. And her partner worked full time. So she, prior to having a bleed, had worked 60 hours per week, and this was all the 6 days at Costa. So when she was referred to us, I just thought I'd give you a quick overview of her assessment. So we'd done the R-bands, which measures 5 key domains, which looks at her immediate memory, visual, spatial and constructional, language, attention, and her delayed memory. And for the memory side of things, she was quite impaired, and her language, she was average. So that's how she'd come to us on the community team. So our neuro team is, we're not a time limited service. However, we do ensure we don't have a dependency, and we keep our role very formal, especially if we know we're going to be involved with somebody for a longer period, maybe up to 12 months, if we are starting from the start and then working towards getting them back to work. We tend to do lots of education, and involve family members or partners to help them understand. With this lady, it was about slowly implementing memory strategies, and she gradually built up her ability to walk her younger son to nursery, because at the time of discharge, she wasn't orientated to where she lived or where local shops and other things were. If I say went on a visit, I'd say, "Oh, what have you done today?" And she had like a blanking expression, but then she'd say, "Well, I must have been to the shop because there's a Coca-Cola bottle on the top." So she was really practical and liked to be busy. And she wanted to return to work and felt that she had nothing to lose from doing that. She'd worked for the company for 16 years. So initially she discussed that with her employer and the manager, and they were quite happy for her to sort of return on an informal basis to go and see how she could cope with the noise and everything else. And I was really shocked that there was no real formal return to work process. And we had one meeting with a manager before she actually went back, and that was just to put her back on some of the systems. And then pretty much for the first 6 months, she did about 10 hours over the week, and she was down as just an extra. Then after about 6 months, they did the formal, referred her to the occupational health referral. And I think at this point they were concerned about some of her memory difficulties. So this lady is very much sort of lives in the moment. She wasn't putting anybody at risk by working at Costa, because she would you print off the drinks, so then she would refer to a printed label. She knew it like the back of her hand because she'd done it for 16 years, so it was very much old memory. And if a new drink came in, I don't know, say the Christmas one, gingerbread latte or something, she would be able to learn that. So she had the formal occupational health referral, and he said she was definitely fine to be a barista, which is one below the manager. However, he was concerned that she may struggle with some of the manager responsibilities. And so that was done about 12 months ago. Then the area manager that was arranging all this just kept delaying meetings or didn't turn up. It was really quite poor. So now we're 2 years later. But I have to say that that process has meant that, Charlie, pseudonym name, has really improved. So as Liz mentioned before, my role, even though it looks like I've been involved for 2 years, that isn't on a weekly basis. Like, I haven't seen her now for 2 months, and I'll just check in via email. I also CC a partner in to support with her memory. Initially, when she first returned to work, I did sort of like 3 face-to-face visits just to monitor how she was managing, and how she was functioning and whether she could do the drinks and everything else. And she is really capable within her job. However, she does have to put strategies in place, like WhatsApping herself. That's her memory to refer to. It has been quite a challenging process at times because she can get fixated on why she had the bleed, and she does get quite fixated on it was because of her long hours that she worked prior to this, and doesn't always have the insight that it's probably because she was smoking high amounts of cigarettes. So that can be difficult, and sometimes if we ever do have a meeting beforehand, I will email her and the partner and plan it out with them to say, can you discuss this? And sometimes I'll say I'll print off something so that she can refer to it in the meeting. So in the midst of all this, returning her to work, she was doing really well, and then they actually arranged a meeting, didn't inform me as the OT, and she actually recorded it. And so then at that point, a partner was able to sort of escalate it and say they wanted me to attend any future meetings. At the moment, she's now gone back because the occupational health report ran out. She's had to go back and have another report done, and they're now saying that she would be able to return to that manager role. So in some ways, their poor return to work policy has helped to keep it improving and improving. And I do think it's really helped having me sort of on the periphery as an advocate for her, because I really do feel they were quite difficult with her and wouldn't let her have other people in the meeting, whereas they haven't put up the challenges to have me attend that meeting. So at the end, you can ask any questions about that, and hopefully Liz has got a quieter background now.
I was thinking he's still a little bit close. Do you want to do one of your AHP report examples? I can share that.
Yeah,
and then
that's
go back
fine.
to my case study.
Okay, if you unshare, I can. I've got them up, Liz, so I can test my. Should I test my technical skills? We'll see. Let me have a look.
Got them if not.
Yeah, okay. So that should have shared. Has that shared with you?
Starting to share, yeah.
Yeah.
Sharing the whole screen though, including your tabs.
Include my tabs, that's fine. Is that all right?
Yeah.
I've not got anything confidential up. Okay. So this is the allied health report that me and Liz had mentioned. So I'll just slowly go down. You can probably Google one as well if you're not familiar with it. So it just explains, it's like a 6-page document. Oh, it's there. Okay. Explains what a report is. And then it's a really good document that means we can sort of gather all the information we need on 2 sheets of paper. So the main one we look at is filling out the patient's details here, and then our details to the right. And then this is where it can turn into a sick note. So it can say you are not fit for work, or you may be fit for work, taking into account the advice below. Then you fill out the date, whether a review is required. And then it's a really good report that looks very formal and captures where somebody's up to. So this is a young lady who's returning to work as a HCA in a hospital. So I've said they need to look at phased return to work, amended duties and altered hours. And then I've gone on to list some of the roles that she would do, just so that she has this they're being really good with her, the matron and also occupational health. So she had no concerns about going back to work. And this is just evidence to help her. She works on the discharge lounge, and at times she can be the only HCA there, sort of transferring patients and feeding them depending on what time the shift is on. And then I find this table really helpful and quick to the point, that you can talk about the different areas of difficulty and then what we recommend. And I just think it's really clear, and it's not, it looks like a really big report to use, but it's so quick to fill out. Do you agree, Liz? Once you get
Yeah.
used to doing them.
And we keep some examples on our database, don't we, which can be changed easier, and staff can look at them for examples if it's cognitive fatigue or upper limb weakness, whenever we're doing them.
Yeah. So I do, and you can use, you know, transfer it. So I have found these really helpful. So that's one was about sort of physical needs. And then I'll stop sharing and I'll just share another one. Choose it. Sorry, Liz, you might have to. I've got it open, but it's not share. Oh, I know what I maybe need to do. I need to highlight that one. Sorry, everybody. I'm showing my poor skills here. Let me see if I can share it now. Yeah, this one that I'm sharing now, this one was more about somebody's cognitive fatigue. So they had more cognitive needs. So again, the start of it is all very similar. And this was a gentleman who had MS, and so he was performing really high in his job, but he didn't feel his employers were being particularly supportive. So it was his MS nurse that had referred to us and said, can we support him in work? So this wasn't a big task, because I just went to see him as a one-off, and then afterwards I did a Teams meeting with him once I'd done the report, and we went through the findings, and that was just to help him have some evidence and more support in work. So often it's quite quick support, and then the report really helped, and they let him put reasonable adjustments in place. So I hope I haven't gone through that too quickly for everybody.
Thanks, Anne. With time getting on, and we'll leave some time for questions, I'll just explain a little bit more about kind of the people that we have worked with. The obviously huge variety of jobs. Some of them have been really quite senior positions. I've got actually this week I've got a new patient who's a human rights lawyer. We've had engineers. My case study was about someone who was kind of a director of 4D printers for colonoscopy machines, and then we deal with people that work in social enterprise, you know, large furniture shops. But the support that we provide through that AHP report generally remains the same. So as Sam said, we collect information, gather with the person, we look through just like an activity analysis like we normally do. What do they do? What might they struggle with now? We use the AHP report also as a bit of it can just be reassurance, can't it, for the employer as well, of someone said this to us, that they recommend a phased return and reasonable adjustments in the short to medium term, and it's just a bit of their go ahead for saying that they can put these things in place at the moment. I was surprised by the amount of employees that don't have HR departments and occupational health. So a lot of the time it is fairly straightforward, just the employer takes this AHP report and says, okay, fine, we recommend regular check-ins to both sides, opportunity to get any concerns across and make sure they're grading up their work as able to. Yeah, in general, we might write on there as well, not just what's difficult, but also the youngish gentleman that I had that was through the 4D printing. I actually wrote on there, he was worried that his employer would think, bad of him for having a stroke. So with his agreement, put on there kind of his cognitive assessment that we've done, the R-bands cognitive assessment, that he generally scored fine, that some parts are still a high average, but we were working on it. Things like that, really. You can use it as a bit of a reassurance to the employer. That's probably all. Do you have anything else to add, Sam?
No, was it your poster you were just going to mention?
Oh yeah. Yeah, so it's just a slide about things we've done. So we presented a poster about VR at the UK Stroke Forum last year, and also internally at the OT Forum for our trust as well. And yeah, and as Sam said, we attend the National VR Network, the Northwest VR Network, both of which are really good if anyone's interested in joining or hadn't known about them. We do an audit of Pathway, do regular audits of HP report content, and ours is called SharePoint, our own staff intranet base, but we've got lots of stuff in our clinical resources, the job analysis sheets, the AHP report examples, links to the training. So that's centrally where everything's kept as well. The staff to easily locate.
Yeah, and I think Laura's just put in the chat about not mentioning people's diagnosis on the AHP report. So I tend to just write the example I just showed you, even though I said, oh, this gentleman had MS, I've not actually put that in the sort of overview, and I tend to just write long-term condition, and then it's up to them if they then want to share what that is.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Alex?
Yeah, I just wondered, how long do you provide the in-work support for? For instance, that lady at Costa.
Yeah,
how do you determine when you stop the support? Is it the employer and the employee and yourself who decide that, or?
with that lady, because I feel like her memory is so poor and she wouldn't have that advocate, I thought she'd return to work, and I think November time I was due to discharge her, and I said, right, I'm going to discharge you now, and I emailed the partner, and then another meeting came up at work, and it sort of started again because the occupational health report had run out of time. But sometimes probably 3 to 4 months, more of a check-in basis of how they're going on. But it really does vary.
Yeah. Do you have any involvement with the kind of health and safety aspect of it? If someone's safe to return to work, is that just left to the employer?
Yeah, that's what had happened with my young gentleman who was assaulted with a traumatic brain injury. So the occupational health, he'd gone to Manchester for a private assessment. They'd said yes, he's fit to return to work, and then the company must have sort of panicked because he had reduced vision, and he would have probably needed a PA type role to support him in work. So he could have done all the project management side of things. And they also changed his job description, whereas he said his job description was probably 10% out and about. They said they swapped it and said it was 10% in office, and he couldn't drive because of his visual problems. So they were being really naughty. And what they did is they called him in for an assessment day, hadn't told anybody. His mum had gone with him to support with that because he was 30 years old, but she'd needed to give him a lift. and they had him going up ladders and all sorts and checking with that. Now, I probably wouldn't be involved with that. What me and Liz had said, if we did a clinic, if we had somebody who said, you know, they needed to move boxes, you'd probably mimic that within a therapy session and say, right, come on then, let's practice it. So that we can say, yes, you're able to move 5 kilos of boxes from one surface to another. So I think early days in our assessment, we see what their job is and what it would entail.
Right.
Yeah,
Oh,
and even like my lady that was a domestic at a care home, part of her therapy goals and her independent practice was to start making the beds and folding up the beds at home and being realistic. If you can't do your own, you're not going to be able to do 20 rooms at the care home. And like Sam says, directing therapy for work. Just to add, as stroke, we're a time limited service, so we're maximum 6 months. Obviously, we don't counsel them to return to work when they immediately get home as well. I'd say that we rarely refer on to Sam, as in we've run out of time with the VR stuff. So most of ours are complete within 3 to 4 months. It normally takes about a month's worth. That's probably just once a week interactions to get the job analysis done, to type up the AHP report, to speak to the employer if needed, to send it, to get any feedback. They do their 4 to 6 week phase return. But a lot of the time it's fairly straightforward. That's the process. Then they're back, or they're still on reduced hours because of fatigue or.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My Costa lady, I would say, is a rarity, and I think that's just because they've been poor as a company, but it's benefited her as for her rehab and for work, because she's going to eventually be able to go back to manager role.
thanks.
Yeah.
Any
I
other
suppose-
questions?
Yeah, is there any questions? Oh yeah. Yes, Carl?
Hi, sorry, I'd put it in the chat, but I just wanted to say
Oh, go
thanks
on.
for that. It was really, really interesting. And sorry if I've already missed this, you may have mentioned it, but with the AHP report, do you send this to the patient's GP? And kind of secondly, with you saying about like fit notes and sort of superseding, do you have any issues with doctors going against what your advice is, that they might sign them off as being ready to return to work, and in your HB report you may feel that that's not quite the case from your therapy assessment? Just wondered if that's ever been an issue.
No, I find I've just had a gentleman now, and he's asking for my support. He's returning to like passport control because he says we know him better than his GP. So, and I feel like the GPs are very supportive if they need a longer period off. With the HP report, we tend to turn it into a PDF and then send it to the patient via email once we've confirmed it's them.
Yeah.
So that then they can share it with occupational health or whoever they need to.
Okay, brilliant. No,
And
that's helpful.
we'd upload it to the GP records as well.
Right, lovely. Thank you. That's good
Yeah.
to know. Thanks a lot.
I think the challenging ones, we've just got a lady at the minute that's going back to, she's a big area manager of Boots, and she really wants to go back because she feels really guilty for being off. She's fallen off a ladder and had a bleed. And I think she's going to go back too soon and fail because the job is just so huge. She has to travel to Leeds and all sorts, like 2 hours on the train. But sometimes I find they're the difficult ones because really she needs a little bit longer off to get better and progress that.
Sometimes they have to experience it for themselves, don't they? Unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah, they've got to sometimes fail.
Yeah. Anything else?
If you do have any questions, we're happy for you to share our email, Alex, if somebody just wants to check in.
Yeah, that's great. I'll do that. If anyone,
Yeah.
if people can put their names in the chat, we can get a certificate out to them. That'd be great. Thank you. Right, I think that's great. Thanks very much, Liz and Sam, for that. Like I said, anyone's got any questions later, they can contact me and I can forward them on to you.
Okay.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. All right. see
Thank
later.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.
You know, bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. See you, Liz.
Bye, Fran.